Hello. Have you ever felt like this?
Oh my gosh. Has this ever stressed you? Do you know what this is? This is one of the smaller psychoeducational evaluation reports I've had to evaluate for a parent. I know it gives them a headache. It gives me one too, because they're really hard to understand. And that's what we're here to talk about today, making these make sense. Can we? Yes, we can.
And I love it. Today we've got our special guest, Vaughn. And Vaughn, I should make sure I say your last name right? Is it Lauer?
It is absolutely
All
perfectly
right,
said.
good. And Vaughn and I have been those internet kind of friends where we've been connected on Facebook. We found our 6 degrees of separation because we both know Kathy Snow, author of Disability is Natural. And Vaughn reached out to me when I was still living in Colorado and said, I love this website you have. I'd love to connect with whoever is in charge of this. And so we had a quick phone call in Colorado and we got to know each other. And since then, we've stayed connected. But Vaughn has had experience as a teacher, as a building district administrator. He's worked on a statewide level. But what I love about Vaughn is he's down to earth. So when you get those reports, and Vaughn, I have another competing report that I pulled out from one of my students. And it's like you get these graphs and you get these tables, and it's like all these little numbers. And as a parent, it's like, I don't know, I guess I'm impressed and I'm glad I paid this psychologist to do this testing, but how in the world is any of this going to help me? So that's the problem that we're going to solve for you today. Vaughn has this wonderful software that you can easily use even if you're a parent and you don't understand statistics. So I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn. He's got some great slides to show us, but we'll also be answering questions. So if you are here with us live, make sure you are typing in the comment box all your questions, and I'll turn it over to Vaughn.
Thank you, Charmaine. Let me get the switch over so that we're on the right. Okay. All right. You should see a screen that says making sense of psychoeducational test scores. And I know if I saw that today, I'd go, yeah, fat chance that's going to happen. But I'm going to show you how it can happen. A lot of us that are on with us right now, and those who are going to be listening to this later, have attempted to understand psychoeducational evaluations, have attempted to explain them to other people, I don't care whether you're a school psychologist, a parent, an advocate, an attorney, it doesn't matter. We've done the old napkin and a pencil drawing the bell curve trick. I know we have, so don't try to deny it. You've been there. Or you spend hours and hours and hours trying to get Excel to do it. And eventually it comes close, but you wasted an entire day, and it's frustrating. So I want to talk a little bit about the things that do frustrate us, that slow us down from taking those reports that I showed you, and then Charmaine taught me because you had bigger, fatter graphs than I did. But the things that are found in there are words that most of us don't understand because we didn't get a master's or a doctoral program in psychometrics. And we'll find numbers in there and terms that go with the numbers like standard deviation, and that's what this chart is, standard scores, percentile scores, z-scores, t-scores, and scaled scores. And I think the most frustrating thing for me has been, not only over the course of time and understanding them, but when I get a report that references the cognitive assessments like the WISC or the DOS, and then gives the scores in that, then reference standard deviations, and they'll talk about standard scores and percentile scores and t-scores and scaled scores, all talking about the same test, and you go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And if you read the text itself, it's impossible to figure out what they mean. Well, these reports are not written for the layperson. I'm not even convinced they're written for teachers, much less parents. And it's not the fault of you or a teacher who doesn't understand it because they don't have the background. What you have is a report. It's a technical report, and it's written in technical terms so that it can stand the muster of review by peers, other psychologists, and courts as well. All of that to say it doesn't help us understand it. Now, I will say that over the course of, and it's 40 years, I have seen a handful of reports that I read and I go, these are the most wonderful things I have ever read. It's almost written like an IEP, where it says, here's the present levels of performance, here's how it affects learning in general, here's how it affects Johnny, and here's how you ought to be addressing it in terms of a goal. And you go, could you do this any better? And I just got one 4 or 5 months ago. Parents sent it.
Can you switch off so people see you full screen?
I'm sorry. Oh, I see what you're saying.
There you go. Good, because you're giving us great tips, so I want to see you.
Okay, so a parent who took one of my courses, in fact, it was this one on how to make sense of psychoeducation evaluations, and she said, I just got this report. She was in the middle of the course. I mean, maybe it was the third week. I'm not sure which. And she said, I swear I'm reading this, and it's exactly what you've been telling us about how a report should be written. So she shared it with me. And I'm just reading it going, oh my gosh, it couldn't be any better. You could just pick it up and you've got your IEP. That's the way a report can be written. Now you need to understand it was like 30 pages long because the psychologist made the effort to explain what he was talking about, how it affected the child, and how it would impact learning in school setting. Oh, and even used school work samples. So that he did everything. He used the test. He gathered all the data that he could. You can't quite get that with my program. And my program up front, I'm telling you, does not do the analysis for you. That's not what it's intended to do. If there's a program out that tells you, it'll do the analysis for you just by looking at the data points. Don't buy it because it can't. And in our educational system, we sit with a team to do that. You're part of that team. You can't make an informed decision any better than anybody else if they don't understand what the data mean. And I've got a program that will help you understand it, certainly help you to be able to ask the questions, but you really will have a very good idea of why your child is having a problem here, but doing very, very well up here, or I guess it would be reverse with the video. And that's what I want to go back to. So I'm going to share the screen.
Sure.
Yeah. Hope I get the right one. Mouse, click over here. Okay, so here we are looking at what we commonly call the bell curve, and most of us are familiar with this. And we're most familiar with average IQ, and we know it's 100. Where we picked that up, I have no idea, but most of us know that. That's what this little line here represents. Good. You should be seeing a circle going down this line. This is the average score. And mathematically, you add all the scores and then divide by the number of people and you get an average. It's very much like a bowling average or a baseball average or whatever it might be. Key here is, as I said, this is average. And then we have something over here that's -1. That's called the standard deviation. And what this represents is the statisticians have taken the data that are across here and broken them up into quadrants and sometimes more. Just a way to divide the information. And it works this way. If I took everybody's shoe size in the world, I would find the average shoe size, well, in this country, it's 9 for men, it's 8 for women. So it's different. But we also know there are a few people with very large feet. There are also, on the other side, a few people with very small feet. But for the majority of people, we're between -1 and +1 standard deviations. Okay. The problem is you'll get reports that say your child's functioning in the average range. And if you're just looking at this average range of -1 to +1, that's a huge distance. In fact, if we look at the next line down, it's called standard scores. And this is what we're most accustomed to. Average IQ is 100. We see that between -1 and +1 is 85 is the low end of average, and 115 is the high end of average. That's a big range. And if somebody's saying your child's in the average range, they could be here, 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 here. It's not very helpful. And so descriptors like that, just put them to the side and say, okay, if that's what's presented to you, ask, what is the standard score? And I say standard score because that one makes most sense to us, because we start with 100 IQ and we can figure out 101 is one more than 100 and so on and so forth. And I reference that because when I look at the next set of scores, it's called percentile scores. And I know you've probably heard these too, but I want you to look at this visually first. The average for percentile scores is 50. No longer is it 100. And if you look, come on mouse, if you look between 50 and 40 and 40 and 30, you'll see they're pretty evenly spaced, just like the standard scores are, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But once you get down to 20 percentile and 10 percentile, there's a huge gap there. It's not equal as it is between 20 and 30 and so on and so forth. And so you can end up hearing that your child, what 50th percentile means is you scored as well as 50% or better than the rest of the population. That's what it means. When I'm talking about standard scores above, I'm talking about the skills, and I'm saying you scored, I'm going to make this up, 100. So I'm getting a measure of the skill. When I hear percentiles, I'm not getting a measure of the skill. I'm getting a measure of the number of people who did that well. Those are two entirely different things. And they're very confusing because what you can hear in a meeting is, and this is what's disturbing,
so can you go back to your full screen?
I'm sorry?
Can you go back to your full screen?
Sure can.
I just think, yeah, it just helps people get connected with you.
Yeah, I don't mind the reminding. So what you have there is that the percentile is a measure of the number of people who got a particular score. So they're apples and oranges. And that's why you can end up being in the 16th percentile, and that sounds really, really bad, but you're still in the average range.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense at all. And these are the problems you have when you're looking at data, when you throw in percentiles with standard scores and scaled scores and T-scores. They don't relate well. Yes.
I'm wondering, like, one tip maybe that parents, and I'm sure we have some advocates and maybe attorneys watching today. So maybe one tip that parents could get is when you're in the IEP meeting and when the school psychologist or the special ed teacher or somebody is giving you test scores, and if they're giving you percentile ranks, one thing that you could do as a parent is say, excuse me, but could you change and can you give me the standard score instead? I mean, would that be something that they could easily ask?
It would. And the second way of doing that, and I'm going to switch back to
that's fine,
is you could carry with you this handy dandy conversion chart, which is about 4 pages long. But you'll see here standard scores that we're accustomed to. And you can see the distance between 100 and 101 is 1. Between 1 and 102 is 1. It's another. They're all the same. But in percentiles, we go from 50 to 53. And it's even worse with scaled scores because you start at, where's my mouse? 10. And the next scaled score is 11. That's a huge jump in between. But what you could do is bring this conversion chart with you And as I said, it's several pages long. You can find this on my website. I have two websites. One is IEP Help. It's as simple as I could make it. I could remember that one. And check out blogs because I have a lot of information there. Or you can go on the website and look for conversion chart and get this, carry it with you. The convenience is that it takes any of those scores that you're likely to see. Hold off on the descriptions for a minute. This is something else. But you can take the score and then convert it to a standard score. Again, I can picture 100 a whole lot better than I can 0.
Right.
That's not helpful. Or a scale score of 10 and then 11. I go, 10, 11. Oh, yeah, I don't know how. Oh, it's 5 points. Okay, maybe they're always 5 points. They aren't always, or they're close to. And it's like, I can't remember what it is. So you can bring this chart with you. What you need to know is for any test score they have the ability to give the standard score as well. Of course, we had to look up all the tests that were out there to find out what they were providing as scores. And if they didn't, for some reason, provide a standard score, we converted it anyway. And sometimes you'll run across that. But for the most part, as you said, Charmaine, you just ask, what is the standard score so I can help visualize this? That's pretty much your standard question for anything. I need to understand this better. What would that be on a standard score? Okay, I can picture that.
And can you come back to your full screen?
Mm-hmm. Doing that now.
So, and what I see a lot of psychologists and teachers trying to explain to parents when they talk about percentile ranks is they'll say, pretend like there's all of these students lined up in a line, and your child is here and he's above all these and below this or whatever. So I think they try to give that example to understand percentile ranks, but I don't think they understand maybe that that's really, like you said, comparing our child to some other children versus comparing our child to the skills that he has or doesn't have. So even if they start giving you that example of, think of 100 people lined up, instead, can you say, can you give me an example of a standard score? Because I know 100 is average, and if I hear 85 for my kid, I know he's kind of on the cusp there of not getting it. Would that make sense?
It is, and I know we talked about the book briefly, but that's the concept I have, is always ask those questions, and it's always asking, help me understand, help me see what you see. I mean, who can get upset with you for asking that question? And it's an honest, sincere question, and it's a standard that you ask. I want to understand what you're saying. And they can provide the standard score. If they say, well, that it doesn't give standard scores, okay, let me hang on just a minute. Let me figure it out. We could do this, but you don't want to be a wise guy, but you can make the point. And yes, you can get a standard score on any.
So I think for parents that, are like do it yourself, if they have that handy dandy conversion chart and they carried it around with them everywhere, that's how they could figure out what the standard score is. That's a number that they can understand. But Vaughn has this wonderful way, using any kind of a computer, a PC, a Mac, or whatever, you can take that report with all these numbers, yes, even your phone, and you plug in the numbers that the psychologist or the teacher gave you, and voila, you get information that's understandable. So Vaughn, why don't you go to your slide that shows how people input that information and what kinds of reports they'll get from it.
Doing that now?
Yeah.
Here we go. I know there's some clever way of putting this, but those pages I showed you through, all of those test scores are what you're looking at now. And honestly, this is how it feels when you're looking at maybe you didn't have this experience yet. I have a number of times. If you haven't, you will. But this is it. What do you do with this information? it's tough, but at least you can see it. All right. What happens in this program is you will take all of those data points that Charmaine showed you in her evaluation and I showed you in the other, and you type them in. You fill them in one at a time. And as soon as you're finished with all the tests, each test typing in the scores, you push a button, you will immediately get this as your first report. And here is April, May. And the first test we're looking at here is the WISC. And what you see on the left-hand side are all the subtests that you keyed data into, listed here. And they're in rank order from the highest to, to the lowest. And what you see immediately is a range of 130 points. That's amazing. The other thing I want to point out to you, from 110 to 85, come to think of it, down here is average. That's why you don't accept the word average. I don't care if you're a teacher or a parent or an advocate, it doesn't matter. No. Explain to me numerically, what is that? What this system will do is whether they give you in the report a standard score, scale score, or a z-score, or some other thing that might come out, they're all automatically converted for you. So that chart that we looked at and we just talked about, you can set it aside because it's done here for you. And it's done for every test. And you're looking at this and going, wow, okay, green, blue, and pink, that's pretty. It just helps you kind of break it down. And all this really helps me do is compare my child to other children. What I'm really interested in is my child to my child. And that's what comes up next. Now imagine again, on the left-hand side, I think there are 7 or 8 tests in this child's report. They're all listed there and you just scroll down. Nice. Here's what you get in the second report. First thing you get are all of the data points that you saw before. But on the left-hand side is the first test, the second test, the third test, and the fourth test, the fifth test. So I'm going to show you what we do with that. Immediately, you see all of these scores below that first standard deviation, which say to you, not only are her test scores below average, some of them are well below average. And this is informative to you, okay? What you can do, that's all of them. What you can do then is look at every test all by itself to see how it's distributed on the bell curve. And if this were live and I were moving the cursor along here, the data points, every time I put it over one of these, a word telling you what the subtest is, and then the actual score would pop up. I've left a couple here so you get a sense. But I also want you to get a sense that I'm not dealing with the IQ score of 104. I'm not really concerned about the IQ score because in every test, it's the subtests that are going to give you the information. So I could tell you, Mrs. Smith, that your daughter, April May, is pretty much her average, her IQ score falls somewhere in here. And I could say, she's average, so that's all there is to it. But you're sitting there saying, oh, wait a minute, there are other test scores that are not so in the average range, and I want to talk about those. So it's easy to fall prey to they're in the average range when there's a host of other pieces of information. That's what this system allows you to do. Focus very closely into a test, several tests, all of the tests, what have you. The second test that was involved in this child's report was the GORT. And here they are again. Notice I'm circling. Notice they're in the below average range. More information. And by the way, you see where it says show? Click on any of these. You can make them disappear or reappear. You don't want that mess we started out with all the data points because it's too confusing. So you can zero in on a particular area. So you've got the ability to focus and a widespread picture. We'll look at another test, and you see what's happening? That circle of problems is still falling in here. I want to back up a little bit and say, okay, we were looking at the WISC, And we were seeing that she's having problems with comprehension. That's reading. That's understanding. And two others that I want to mention, digit span and picture span. And they're really memory issues and they're processing issues. And so we're getting a sense that she must be having some problems processing information. Keep that in mind. Because when I go to the GORT and I'm looking at her ability to read, I also see that she's having problems with fluency and rate, how fast she can process these words. Wait a minute, didn't I just see that? Yeah, I did. And then when I look at the C-top, I see that she's also having problems with rapid. I don't even need to know what all of these mean right away, but I do recognize that rapid is speed. Speed is processing. Well, that's how many reports now are telling me that she's having some processing problems. I wonder how that's affecting learning. Oh, lo and behold, we add the KTEA, which is a measurement of achievement, and what shows up? Reading fluency, reading word recognition, and I forget what the other fluency is back there. And you go, okay, my gosh, look. I know that cognitively in the WISC she had these problems, that they showed up in the C-top processing, they showed up in the GORT, which is processing, and I finally look at the academics. Now I understand why she's having a reading problem. You understand it, and everybody in the team does. And the beauty of this is you're presenting this on a wall in the school because it's accessible through the internet, and you can share it anywhere. And they're all sitting there going, I get this. And I'm going to just stop for a second and share with you that this is exactly what the feedback has come back. I did this with alpha testing and beta testing with parents, advocates, special education attorneys who work with parents, psychologists, educators, and I keep forgetting there's another one. And they all said, when I used it, you could just see the expressions on the IEP, or the whole focus change from all the peripheral conversations to the child's needs because they could see it. One said, it's a game changer. It will change the way IEP meetings are held forever because the focus is right there. It isn't a perfect system because people aren't perfect and the people you're working with have to be reasonable. There was a parent, an advocate who came back and said, you know what? It didn't matter. She said, I'm just dealing with a very hard school system. And by the way, this has been worked on with people across the country and Canada, I'm very proud to say. But the results are the same because they can literally see for the first time what those pages that we were flipping mean. So,
well, and I think it's like, so I just am like so ecstatic about using this tool. I've done some trials on the tool, and it's like I just love the information that you can get. And what Vaughn is saying is, instead of just saying your child doesn't do well with reading, we now can look at those subtests. We don't have to plot it out ourselves, and we can pinpoint why these reading problems are occurring and what we need to focus on. The other part that people who know me know that I also love to find out what strengths your child has. So what I'm hoping that IEP teams do more of is let's first look at your child's strengths, because later when we identify those needs, I'm going to help your child through those strengths to learn new skills. So what Vaughn's tool does, and it's called the Special Education Decoder System, what his tool does is allow you to input this massive amount of test scores that you get, and it's like a click away, and almost magically through technology, you come up with that color-coded list that Vaughn showed us, and you know at the top, those are the areas that your child excels in. Let's remember that. So when we're writing accommodations and everything else, we tap into those strengths. But then as we go down that color-coded sheet, we start seeing the areas of need. And when you bring that print off to your IEP meeting with you, then you can either have hard copies or, like Vaughn said, you can project it. And all the IEP team members can see all the information at the same time. And then you can start developing annual goals that make sense. But
Absolutely.
if you just go through IEP meeting after IEP meeting and hear people rattle off these scores, and chances are very few people on the team understand what they mean, we've got to change how we do things. So Vaughn's tool, the special education decoder system, is a game changer for parents and advocates and attorneys and school staff. So it's just, I don't know, I'm just like so excited because I think there's so much potential. But I don't know, Vaughn, if there's any other features that you want to talk about it, or if you want to talk about how the pricing is set up. And the other thing I wanted to mention, if you want to get the coupon code to get a 10% discount, which is good between now and the end of September, type the word code in the comment box. Even if you're watching on the replay, type the word code and you will get a special code. But are there any other features that you want to talk about, Vaughn, before we talk about pricing and how things are kind of structured?
Yes, I want to show folks something really, really fast. And this is how I would recommend, if you're going to present this to a school, that you do it. You do start with and I get away from the intelligence test because it gives you so much more information. It's cognition. But you already know this, I'm going to do it really fast. So you present the whisk, and then you present the whisk when you add the gort on top, and then you present it with the whisk and the gort and the C-top, and so on and so forth. And no matter what, the fact there were 2 achievement tests on here, and both of them highlighted deficits in reading, strengths in math, and something else. So you can show them visually how you're building, and something you just mentioned was how to write an IEP. It's more than just will increase reading. It is, I'm going to improve the ability to process skills. That's what the disability is. It's not reading, and that's what needs to be addressed in the IEP. How do I know it's important? Because 3 tests back, it showed me that 2 tests back, 1 test back, and the achievement is, the reason it's last is because I was going to say puts the nail in a coffin, but it just confirms everything you already know, that all of those processes are the reason we're having the problem here. So yeah, I want to increase reading, but I want to do it by instructing on those processes that we defined here. So that's what I wanted to say. In terms of what's available, there is the single purchase, which gives you the ability to do 1 record.
Do you want to switch to your full screen?
I'm so glad you're here.
That's fine.
There are 2 levels. There's the basic and the advanced. And the basic gives you pretty much what I showed you here. The next level up, and there's not a great price differential, but oh my gosh, the things you get with it are just amazing, because you can do 1 print, 1 button and push, and the graph that you're looking at is automatically saved. You don't have to go through all the steps of copying and pasting. You also have the ability to compare the same version test from 1 year to the second. And there are cautions with all use of data, but you can't do comparisons in the basic. You also have access to, I guess it is a secret Facebook page where just other owners of this program meet, and you will have monthly either blogs, which you also have information in, but you also have monthly trainings, or you'll have people like Charmaine who will stop in and say, this is the reality of it. Some of you people who are listening now might say, I'd like to be a co-presenter on a topic, and that is welcome too. It's not a place to complain. It's not a place to talk about other school districts. It's a place to talk about data and how to use them, including progress reports, which this program does not address. The only thing I do need to repeat, and other things, but the list is there when you go to the site, specialeddecoder.com. It also is simple. Read what you're able to do while you're there. There's a free trial. It only allows you to work with 2 tests. You make up the data. but it gives you the opportunity to play with it and see how you can show and hide. You can't do the comparisons because it's not set up that way, but you can also pick up, when you sign up for that, the manual that will show you all of the things that it can do, and it helps you decide what program you want. If you're an advocate and you're working with more than one person, you may want to buy 50 records or 100 and so forth. But get the manual, because it has few words, lots of pictures, for a couple of reasons. I wanted to make it easy to understand, and my friends who have dyslexia have children with dyslexia, and they politely remind me, not a lot of words, okay? Make this easy for them. I said, okay, well, the program's easy. Let's make this easy too, and we've done that. So I'm really excited, and the programmer that I'm working with had no idea about special education. He's now an honorary special education person. And one day he said, wow, this makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is, I go, you're there. He said, this is a great program. And I said, yeah, you built it for me. But he got it. And he said, this is amazing. So, of course, he's a smart guy too. But when he had that aha moment, he was starting to apply it. It was a wonderful thing too. So.
Oh, yeah. I just think it's going to, for parents, it's going to clarify things. For advocates who work with a number of families, it's going to be a great time saver. I see this for special education attorneys. If you're going to due process, and you have an expert witness that can explain scores, and you have these printouts that you can use in your evidence book, it's going to make it clear to the hearing officer. It's going to make it clear to everybody. So this has so many benefits for different groups of folks. But I know right now, Vaughn, you're focusing on, certain groups. So do you want to talk about the groups that you're, really reaching out to right now?
The folks that I wanted to hit with up front were parents and advocates, and then special education attorneys. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with COPA. Many of you may belong to COPA. They're a group that we share information with, and I'm hoping to present there with an attorney. There's also a Virginia group of attorneys and advocates who are looking at this going, this makes a lot of sense. And that's the group I'm focused on now. The next setting, and that's down the line, will be colleges and universities. I figure there are going to be some schools come knocking on my door because they're going to see this and go, you know what? We could save a lot of hassle here if my people understood this too, and we could present this. And I think it's going to be a way to avoid due process and mediation because everybody's going to understand. But as Charmaine points out, imagine needing a third party and you show this to them and they go, well, it looks to me, yes, that's what we see too, and thank you very much. And schools, so will be later. And that's just how I want to get it out.
Right.
That's why I may not have everything in place at this point, but the program is here and the marketing has just started in terms of this is what's here. Take a look at it. Please try it out for free. Don't buy it. You wouldn't buy a car without trying it out. Don't hear it. So it's easy to use, and the support is there. If you have any questions, ask or just ask me. I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Well, and one of the questions that I get a lot of times from parents is trying to help them understand what grade equivalent scores mean. Because I think so many special ed teachers will report grade equivalent scores to parents and think that that's going to be the easiest for them to understand. But they don't understand what the problem is grade equivalent scores don't really tell you what you think they tell you. And Vaughn has this great blog post. So if you're interested in the blog post, write blog in the comments and I'll get you the link for that. But could you explain for us, Vaughn, why grade equivalent scores aren't something that we really want to be using?
Yeah, there's a caution with every data set that we use. And that's part of the training. We can't do it here. And I will tell you that I argued with a fairly known on the internet circle advocate the reason not to use grade equivalence, and he just said, well, it's easier to understand. Parents understand it better. Well, it's people like Charmaine that I get attracted to because she knows it doesn't mean grade level. That's not at all what it means. And it sounds like, as you said, it should make sense. Well, here's an example. Mary knows the numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Hector knows 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. They both know 5 of those. They would both get the same. That's the raw number. They got 5 right. They end up getting the same grade equivalent. That's the easiest way to understand it. You're sitting there, wait a minute, they know different things. Exactly. All grade equivalents do is say, how many of the test questions did you get right? It doesn't tell you what they got right. You can't use it as a measurement for the next year or measurements of growth because you're not measuring skills. It's almost like percentiles, which is pretty much what it is. It's how many. So there's the flaw with it, and yet you see test publishers present it. It's a very gross screening number, but you can't use it to make decisions, and you certainly couldn't use it to make the writing of goals and objectives. So that's the flaw in grade equivalence. Whereas other tests like key math is a perfect diagnostic. It will tell you exactly, but it's division by 2 digits with a remainder. Oh, okay. Well, the teacher could tell you that too because they have classroom work. So, and then please don't negate classroom performance and classroom work. That's as equally as important. It's like adding the achievement tests to all the cognitive processes. You want affirmation that's there. So yeah, I'm glad you raised that one. That in measuring, you could have the same standards. I just throw this out and we'll stop. But you can have the same standard score 3 years later. It doesn't mean you didn't learn something. There's a little more explanation to that. But you need to, I guess what this raises is it's important to have an understanding of these test data. If you're a novice to this, you'll sit down with this and go, holy cow, I got to look up some of these words. I don't know what pseudo word decoding means, but you'll become experienced. But you reach your point to go, I don't know really what all this means. There is a time you have to seek assistance, and you will find an advocate, or you'd be lucky if you were married to a statistician. That would be helpful. Or an educational diagnostician of some sort. There is a time you're going to have to look for other help. But this will still set you in the right direction, and you can still take the results of this because it's portable. You can use their computer instead of yours. You own this once it's in the system, and share that and say, what does this mean? Excuse me.
I know, and that's the thing that I think is so helpful. So do you want to show your slide that shows where they can go to get the trial?
Absolutely. Well, okay, you already know it's a special educator decoder system. And where you go for this, and it's only a couple pages long, so it's not hard to find, is specialeducationdecoder.com. Google now recognizes it. It didn't a week and a half ago, so this is almost literally hot off the press. You're the second large group, I think, to be aware of this. And so just go there. And like I said, there is a coupon for a discount, and check out the free version. Make sure you get that and then download the manual so you can take a look at it. You also, I forgot to mention, there is the list of tests that are on the website. You'll find a couple references to 40 plus tests in blue. Just click on that if you haven't gone to the actual program itself. And that will give you the list of all the tests, so you know what's in there in advance. There are no secrets here. Those tests are added to. I missed one that was very commonplace. How we missed it, I'm not sure, but we did. And so we're very responsive, and it's added to regularly when sufficient numbers say, hey, here's a test that we use in Colorado and New Jersey and Florida. Well, maybe that should be added. I don't put in proprietary tests like any of the curricular measurement tests. I'm not going to mention any, but there are several out there. We stay away from those and stick to the ones that are standardized nationally.
Great. And could you share with us your book? Because not only is Vaughn great at dissecting test scores and trying to help us figure out in a layman's terms what they mean, but he also has an excellent book that you can pick up and start reading before school starts. So you want to tell us about your book?
Yeah, the title of it is When the School Says No, How to Get the Yes. And I know it sounds like a very negative book, but if I made it sound like what it really is, a book on how to collaborate with schools, nobody'd buy it. That was the problem. Now, I will tell you up front, a lot of the stories are, there are scenarios, 13 scenarios in here, and many are with parents of autism. But the issues that they raise are assistive technology, services, removal of services before they should have been provided, the very experiences you are now, misunderstanding tests, and so they're applicable to anybody. And there's some people don't think so until they read it and go, oh yeah. And I will tell you that, again, 13 parents here, but I worked with a bunch of others when putting this together, and two of them, one from the book and two in the field, wrote back and said, you know what, I took your concept of asking these key questions in a meeting on the collaboration process, and actually I show you how to go through the steps, really simple. In fact, they're on the back of my, oh, here it is. No, somewhere around here is my card, but the 6 questions are listed on the back of it, which you can share at the meeting. They applied it at the workplace and said, you know what, it works there too. I do know that. That's partially where the concept came from. It was while I was working with Educational Testing Service, developing the alternate performance assessment with California, the Department of Education there. We were working with people all over the country and California. There was no model for what we created in the country. And it required that we would meet together, fall apart, meet together, fall apart. Everybody was responsible for input. The questions were asked of everybody, and I'm going through this process and going, this could be used at an IEP meeting, and that's exactly what it is. So the questions actually walk you through the steps of how to develop an IEP. What I want to point out here is the first question is, what do we know? With that is, what don't we know? And everything we've talked about today is the answer of questions, what do we know, what don't we know? And if we don't know something, then we need to evaluate it. But we don't know that we need to evaluate it until we know what we know. I know that's kind of circular, but that's why this program came to be, as well as I'm watching Facebook conversations. Yes, I did live the educational side, and I moved over to advocating with parents, but I kept well, I know what they do over here, and I know what they do here too. How do we mesh? That's where this came from. What's the biggest thing that's missing? Understanding those data. And so they're very complementary. So thank you for remembering that.
I think that's excellent. And like I said, for parents that would like to have a new book to read, and it's an easy read, when the school says no, how to get the yes, is, I just love the I don't know, the way that Vaughn's broken it down. And if you follow those 6 steps, you'll be, and Vaughn, I'm hearing some echo. I don't know if you've got Facebook or something on, but the 6 questions that he asks, it just like takes you through the IEP process. So I encourage you to read that. We've had several people on live with us, Yael has said, yay, this sounds amazing.
It is.
And Venus, who is one, she lives in New York City, and she's a parent, but she also works in the school system. And so she was on with us live, and a few other viewers. So I'm excited to bring this information to you. If you have a friend that didn't catch it live, tell them it will be up as a replay. Vaughn and I will both be coming back into Visions and Voices Together Facebook page and answering questions, or, making certain that you understood a certain part, or I'll be putting in the blog link. So check back to our Facebook page. Know that every Thursday at noon, I do a live Facebook show on a variety of topics. So make sure you catch us every Thursday at noon. But I'd love to just give you lots of thumbs up and hearts and likes, Vaughn, because this was an excellent presentation on a tool that can benefit so many parents, advocates. And then the final outcome is our kids are going to be the winners. Our students are going to be the ones that really get the individualized help that they need at school. And therefore, they're going to be more successful at school. So that's our real purpose. Remember, if you want the code, type in code. We'll make sure that you get the discount code. But Vaughn, do you have any final words before we sign off?
I think you said it perfectly, Charmaine. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for inviting me to be with your family of colleagues and friends. Thanks, folks. I wish you the best. Both Charmaine and I are easy to find. Yes, we are. So thank you.
All right. Until next Thursday, you guys take care, and remember to keep on keeping on. Bye.